I'm going to answer 7 questions about cognition, and this involves magisterium. You have to know what magisterium is in order to understand Catholicism. And magisterium is not something that Catholics made up, it's just common sense expounded into a word. So, cognition, when I went through university, especially through my literature classes and my cultural studies classes, which, by the way, was a waste of money, but not all of it was useless. Some of what we learned was differentiating between our senses and our perception. And they call this sensation and perception, but when you're taking it in literature, they'll give it other names, or in cultural studies. So in cultural studies, we had to study what is called critical theory, which is basically you take a concept by a great thinker or a book or whatever, and you have to deconstruct it, but you don't deconstruct it with your own lens. You deconstruct it with more of an objective lens. And you might get lost in these terms, but basically what it is when you learn something, you have a lens. You sense it. You're looking at words on the page, but then you have a lens to comprehend those words. So let's say I'm reading the Bible, and I'm reading a passage from St. Paul, and St. Paul says something, and then you think, okay, well, either I can read it like this or read it like that. Now, several out there think, well, no, there's a magisterium that just comes to you when you read the Bible, and this is a fairy tale. It doesn't work. No one has a universal, and if they did, they would all join the same church, but they don't. There is no universal magisterium. There's forms of intellect, and some people have greater intellect than others. And what we can say is that the people who generally tend to be more intellectual will have a better cognition. They'll take information and they'll process it a lot better than those other people who will. And unfortunately, it's just this way. But your cognition is the lens in which you understand these things, and you have to develop it, build it, like a muscle that needs to be exercised in your body. All of your brains are like muscle. All of your brain is like muscles. All 8 lobes of it in your hindbrain. They're like muscles. You need to practice it. If you want to work on your hindbrain, you have to do athletic things, like go biking or catch baseball or hockey or whatever. That's what you need to develop it. While cognition is a muscle that needs to be developed. So, next question. Why are there so many different Christianities? It is because, chiefly, that everyone has a different lens. Now, in cultural studies, when we understand, they're a bunch of children of Ruth Benedict. Ruth Benedict was this woman in the 1800s that popularized, this idea is as old as time itself, but popularized the idea that all cultures are right and no cultures are wrong. This is cultural relativism. So that means that all cultures have a point of view of seeing things, and that we all have to respect those points of view and not treat them as foreign and beneath us. However, this just simply isn't the case. Some people have a superior point of view than others. This has to, again, be trained. If it's trained in the wrong way, it will lead to the wrong conclusions. It leads to error. Well, guess what? We live in a world full of error. Error does not stem from our not respecting other cultures. Error stems from the errata that occurs out of these lenses. So, when you're looking at something and you don't see what everyone else sees, your glasses are broken or their glasses are broken. It is one or the other. It's not, well, your glasses are fixed and theirs are too, and we're all right. No. Everyone has broken glasses. This is something we have to understand about humanity. Everyone has broken glasses. So when we have multiple Christianities, it is the result of pride. Because pride is what makes you believe in your own perspective above all others. And this is what happens this is how idolatry is created in the first place. We build God with our human hands. This is something that people don't understand. The idolatry is not something, it's not literal translation of Exodus and Leviticus passages where you have to build graven images out of wood or rock. No, it's so much more than that. It's saying that your version of God is greater than everyone else's version of God. That is idolatry. Now, next question. Why can we not rely on the Bible alone then? And you might think, well, you just answered that question, but I will go into it even further. Let's say St. Paul says something, and a lot of Protestants use St. Paul passages to say, like, well, he says this, therefore it is law. And this is an incorrect magisterium. Not everything St. Paul says is law, and this is something we have to understand. At the end of John, in its epilogue chapter, it's chapter 21, John relates, St. John, the evangelist, relates that if all of Christ's deeds were written down, not all of the books in the world could contain them. And this means to say that although there's a lot written in that book, there's a lot written in the Bible, and the Bible is not all of the books of the world, by the way. And though it's extensive, it's not to say that it's not inerrant. It is inerrant, but it is to say that it doesn't tell the whole truth. You cannot possibly put the whole truth in words. And I'm going to say this again, an anecdote about St. Augustine, who was trying to write a treatise on the Holy Spirit. He one day had a vision of seeing a boy on the beach, and the boy was trying to take water from the Mediterranean Sea and put it into a hole in the sand. And St. Augustine asked him, "Why are you doing this?" And the boy said, "Well, isn't that what you're doing by trying to put the Holy Spirit into a book?" He's trying to put the entire Mediterranean Sea into that little hole in the sand. The Bible cannot contain every single truth out there. We must develop our cognitive abilities to be able to comprehend what's in there. And even then, we're humans. Humans have such low capacity for cognitive abilities. Ask anyone who's had an NDE, a near-death experience, and they'll say, well, when I was in the soul, it's like I could process everything instantly. It's like I knew everything about something. Now, obviously, they forget it when they wake up because they're again limited to their brain, their human cognition, rather than their soul's cognition. But this is the way it is. Even the German mystic, Catherine Ann Emmerich, and I just read this morning, she was explaining to her poet, her scribe, that when she was having visions and whatnot, it's like she was having, and she couldn't explain it. It was like she lived in two separate realities. The first reality was warm and inviting, was like a meadow, and they're singing. And the second reality was this cold, this place where everyone was like, as she described, in a cask. Like in a casket trying to talk, and their words were muffled. Well, this is why in our human experience, the muffling doesn't come from the expression, but rather from the cognition of others. If you have a sharper cognition, you start to understand others on a different level. So when a person with high cognitive abilities reads a poem, he reads a different piece of work than, say, someone in grade 7, who's looking at that poem the first time and just trying to discern it from the words that are written on the page. No, there's a lot written in between the lines. You have to learn to do this. This is why we cannot alone rely on the Bible, because the Bible doesn't necessarily develop cognitive abilities. It can. This is what we call a catechesis, which develops your cognitive abilities. It can. However, it's not certain, and we know this because there are too many different Christianities. God desired all Christianity to be one, but because it is many, then we know that the Bible alone cannot fix a person's cognition. Next question. Can these rifts between Christianity be repaired? The answer is, unless people do away with their pride, their idolatry, then no. And there's a lot of Christians out there who've developed what I call a Bibleolatry, which is my magisterium of the Bible is superior to all others. Therefore, I can never be corrected. Therefore, your lens will never be fixed. And they'll say, well, it is between me and God. Well, God doesn't always use his direct spiritual influence as a conduit. In fact, God tests us for humility. If we don't have humility before other men, why then are we going to have humility towards angels and God? So God could give you a dream, and if you don't understand, or your guardian angel could direct your dreams, and if you don't understand it, well, you're stuck. So the next question, why did God create us to be such passionate creatures that is so attracted to idolatry? Because we tend to defend our idolatry with passion. And passion is a weapon, but it is used against us. It's employed against us. The demons know this, and it employs against us. But if you didn't have passion, if you did discover God, you would have no fervency to want to reveal him to the world. So that's why we're passionate. It's just the way it is. It's like, well, why did God make us? Why did nature and God make us in a way that when we experience sexual disorientation when we're kids, when we get molested or abused in the worst kinds of ways, that we develop an attachment to those things, and that it spoils us for the rest of our lives? And it's simply because if you order these things correctly, if you're not molested, if you actually fall in love with the woman you marry, you will give more power to that marriage. That will create a powerful bond. So it's like, why are we glue? Because we're glue. We need to bond with one another. And unfortunately, that comes with pros and cons. You can glue your hands together. That's not good. But you can also glue planks of wood together and create a wonderful piece of furniture. That is good. So that's why we're passionate. It can be used as a good or bad thing. Next question, what if we didn't have a good father or good protection? And this is the problem that a lot of people struggle with. And there's people that don't want to believe in generational curses for this reason, that they have an error in their cognition. They say, well, if we're baptized, then we are wiped clean. Original sin can't get at us. Demons can't get at us. That is not true. Demons can still get at you, but now you have the grace to be able to resist your predilection towards original sin. Without baptism, you lack that grace. Instead, you have to do it entirely cognitively. Well, grace does give you added power to do so. People might not believe it, they may not see it, they may not acknowledge it, but you don't see the wind, yet it is real. Yet put out your head at the window of a car going 120 miles an hour. You may not see the wind, but you'll certainly feel it. And unfortunately, in this reality, when we have bad parents, i.e., when we have an Adam that commits a sin and God asks him, "What have you done?" Well, that means all of humanity got spoiled by Adam's behavior. This is why we have Christ as the Redeemer. Christ came down and he offered us another road to take. He offered us the baptism, the baptismal grace. And several people have taken the baptismal grace. In fact, even the promise of the Messiah was enough. Just the promise alone was enough for the wise men to travel from the east to Jerusalem or to Bethlehem to see the young King of Kings. So though we may, and are you in a less advantageous or a more advantageous position than those wise men who never had baptism, yet they still sought Christ? The truth is that you can seek Christ because you simply seek to know the answer, even without baptism, and then you'll be given baptism, and then you'll develop a resistance to the predilection of evil within you. Last question: how can I change the way I see things if I'm broken? Well, you have to understand the first rule of being corrected is taking on a mentor. So you have to find a saint. You have to find great priests, great prelates that move you. You can be moved by the words of Christ in the Bible. You can be. But you cannot rely on your own interpretation of them, because they're not only, and we say, well, the Bible is inerrant, but that doesn't mean you're inerrant for reading the Bible, because your cognition is broken. It's not the Bible that errs, it's the people that read it that err. The Bible is a Catholic document. However, we have several different forms of catecheses. The Holy Spirit and the angels operate in many ways to get us to huddle in towards the Messiah, towards the Redeemer. So in order to change yourself, you have to not be inspired by yourself, but by people who've done it better than you. The church has the stars in the sky, the saints, especially the greatest exemplar of them all, the Virgin Mary. Ave Maria.